I'm Jessica Miller, and I'm 28 years old. My parents threw my belongings onto the front lawn like garbage bags on trash day, while $29 million sat in my bank account. I stood there in my pajamas at 7 in the morning, watching my childhood photos scatter across the wet grass. My mother didn't even look back as she slammed the door. 3 hours later, I was sitting in a coffee shop when my phone exploded. 72 missed calls. Apparently, word travels fast when you inherit more money than most people see in 10 lifetimes. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt completely blindsided by family betrayal. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Let me back up and tell you how I ended up here. Because 24 hours ago, I was just regular Jessica Miller, the disappointment daughter who still lived at home. I worked part-time at a local bookstore, had exactly $347 in my checking account, and my biggest worry was whether I'd have enough gas money to make it through the week. My family wasn't wealthy, but we weren't poor either. Dad worked construction, Mom was a nurse, and my younger brother Tommy was the golden child studying pre-med at State. I was the one who never applied herself, according to every family dinner conversation for the past decade. The call came Tuesday afternoon while I was shelving romance novels. My manager Sarah handed me the phone with this weird look on her face. "Some lawyer wants to talk to you." The voice on the other end was crisp and professional. "Miss Miller, this is attorney Robert Henley from Henley, Bradford & Associates. I represent the estate of Margaret Miller. I need to discuss your inheritance with you immediately." Margaret Miller. Great-Aunt Margaret, my dad's aunt. The family black sheep who moved to California 30 years ago and never looked back. I'd met her exactly twice in my life, both times when I was little. She sent me $20 bills and birthday cards until I turned 18. Then nothing. "I'm sorry, but I think you have the wrong person," I said, wedging the phone between my shoulder and ear while continuing to stack books. I barely knew her. "Miss Miller, I assure you I have the correct person. Margaret Miller passed away 6 months ago and left you as the sole beneficiary of her estate. We need to meet immediately to discuss the transfer of assets." The books in my hands suddenly felt impossibly heavy. "What kind of assets?" There was a pause. "I'd prefer to discuss this in person. Are you available tomorrow at 10 a.m.? I agreed, mostly because I figured it might be enough money to finally move out of my parents' house. Maybe a few $1,000s, enough for a security deposit on an apartment. The family joke was that eccentric Aunt Margaret probably left me her collection of ceramic cats. How wrong we all were. Wednesday morning. I drove my beat-up Honda to the law office downtown. The building was all marble and mahogany, the kind of place that screamed serious money. Robert Henley looked like he'd stepped out of a legal drama, complete with silver hair and an expensive suit. "Miss Miller," he said, gesturing to a leather chair across from his massive desk. "Thank you for coming. I imagine this comes as quite a surprise." "A little bit," I admitted, fidgeting with my purse strap. "I mean, I always figured she'd forgotten about me." He smiled. "On the contrary, Margaret spoke about you frequently. She was very proud of your independence and character." "My character?" I almost laughed. "Sir, I think you might have me confused with someone else. I work part-time at a bookstore and live with my parents." She specifically mentioned that. He opened a thick folder. "Margaret believed you were the only family member who wasn't motivated by greed or status. She watched your family dynamics very carefully during her visits." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean, watched?" "Margaret was exceptionally wealthy, Miss Miller. She made several fortunes in California real estate and technology investments. Over the years, various family members reached out to her when they needed money. You never did." He was right. I'd never even thought to contact her. When Tommy needed money for college, Mom and Dad had discussed asking rich Aunt Margaret, but decided against it. When Dad's construction business hit a rough patch, there was talk about California money, but I'd always stayed out of those conversations. "How wealthy are we talking about?" I asked. Robert Henley looked me directly in the eyes. $29,400,000, plus a house in Malibu, various investments, and several pieces of valuable art. The room tilted. I gripped the arms of the chair to keep from falling over. "I'm sorry. What?" $29.4 million. "Miss Miller, it's yours." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. When none came, I started laughing. Not happy laughter, but the kind of hysterical giggling that happens when your brain short-circuits. "This is insane," I managed between laughs. "You're telling me that the aunt I barely knew left me almost $30 million? The transfer will be complete within 48 hours, he confirmed. "However, there's one condition. Margaret insisted that you not tell your family about the inheritance until after the money is in your account. She was very specific about this. The drive home was a blur. I kept thinking I'd imagined the whole thing, that I'd wake up and find myself back in my normal life. But the legal documents in my passenger seat were very real, and my phone kept buzzing with confirmation emails from banks I'd never heard of. $29 million. The number felt impossible, like trying to imagine the distance to the moon. I'd gone from counting quarters for laundry money to having more wealth than most people could spend in a lifetime. When I got home, my family was exactly where I'd left them. Dad was watching television, Mom was scrolling through her phone, and Tommy was at the kitchen table with his textbooks. Normal Wednesday afternoon, completely unaware that everything had just changed. "How'd the lawyer meeting go?" Mom asked without looking up. "Was it worth missing work for?" I stood in the doorway, holding papers worth more money than they'd ever seen. "Fine, just some paperwork to sign." Tommy glanced up from his organic chemistry textbook. "What did the crazy old lady leave you? Her collection of weird pottery?" "Something like that," I said. The lie felt strange on my tongue, but Robert Henley had been very clear about Margaret's wishes. She wanted me to have 48 hours to process everything before my family knew. Looking back, I think she understood them better than I ever did. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my laptop balanced on my chest as I refreshed my bank account every few minutes. Nothing yet, but the lawyers had warned me the transfer would take time. I kept reading Margaret's letter, trying to understand why she'd chosen me. "Jessica?" It began in her careful handwriting. "You're the only one in our family who never asked me for anything. Everyone else saw dollar signs when they looked at me, but you just saw a person. That matters more than you know." She'd been watching us for years, apparently, paying attention to how we treated each other, how we talked about money, how we handled disappointment. She'd noticed that when Tommy needed college funds, I picked up extra shifts at the bookstore to help with family expenses without being asked. She'd seen that when Dad's business struggled, I quietly canceled my own plans to save money. I'd never thought of those things as character traits. They just seemed like what you do for family. The letter continued, "I'm leaving you everything because I trust you to use it wisely. But be careful. Jessica, money changes people, and it reveals who they really are. Some of your family members may surprise you, and not in good ways." At the time, I thought she was being paranoid. These were my parents, my brother. They loved me. Sure, we had our problems, but what family doesn't? Money couldn't change the fundamental bonds between us. Thursday morning arrived with no change in my bank account, but something felt different in the house. Dad was making phone calls in hushed tones, and Mom kept giving me strange looks over breakfast. "Jess," she said casually, buttering her toast. "That lawyer who called yesterday, what was his name again?" "Robert Henley," I answered, not thinking anything of it. She nodded like she was filing that information away. "And he said it was about Aunt Margaret's estate?" "Yeah, just some final paperwork." Tommy looked up from his cereal. "Did she leave us anything good? I could use some extra cash for med school applications." "Tommy," Dad warned, but he was smiling. "Don't be greedy." But I could see something calculating in his expression. They were all watching me differently, like they were waiting for something. It made me uncomfortable in a way I couldn't quite name. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Emma. "Coffee later? You seemed weird yesterday." Emma was the only person I'd told about the lawyer meeting, though I hadn't mentioned the amount. She knew something was up, but I wasn't ready to explain that I'd apparently become one of the wealthiest people in our small town overnight. I spent the day at work, distracted and jumpy every time my phone buzzed. Sarah noticed my mood and sent me home early, which was perfect because I needed to check my account one more time. At 4:37 p.m. on Thursday, July 20th, my bank account balance changed from $347 to $29,400,347. I stared at the screen for a full minute, my hands shaking. It was real. All of it was actually real. That's when my phone started ringing. The first call was from a number I didn't recognize. Then another. Then another. By 6 p.m., my phone had become a constant stream of notifications. Calls, texts, emails, even friend requests on social media from people I'd never heard of. Somehow, word had gotten out. I was sitting in my car outside a gas station, trying to process what was happening, when my dad called. "Jessica." His voice was tight with emotion I couldn't identify. "We need to talk." "Come home right now." "Dad, what's going on? How does everyone know about just come home?" He cut me off. "And don't talk to anyone else until you get here." The 15-minute drive felt like hours. Cars were parked outside our house that I didn't recognize. Through the living room window, I could see people moving around inside. My stomach dropped as I realized my quiet family meeting had turned into something much bigger. I walked through the front door to find my parents, Tommy, both sets of grandparents, my Uncle Jerry, and several people I didn't immediately recognize, all sitting in our small living room. Everyone turned to look at me when I entered. "There she is," Uncle Jerry said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Our little millionaire." The word hit me like a slap. "How did you—" "Tommy ran into Jake Morrison at the bank," Mom explained. Jake was a teller at First National and apparently had a very loose interpretation of client confidentiality. He mentioned seeing some interesting account activity. Tommy had the grace to look embarrassed. "I was just making a deposit for my apartment fund." Jake said something about the Miller family having a big day. $29 million, Dad said slowly, like he was testing how the words sounded. "That's what Jake said." The room went completely silent. Everyone was staring at me with expressions ranging from shock to something that looked uncomfortably like hunger. "Is it true?" Grandma Miller asked quietly. I could have denied it, could have claimed Jake was mistaken or exaggerating. But something in their faces told me they already knew the truth, and lying would only make things worse. "Yes," I said simply. The explosion of voices was immediate. Everyone talking at once, asking questions, making suggestions, sharing their opinions about what I should do with the money. Through the chaos, I caught fragments. College fund, investment opportunities, family business, new house. Have you ever experienced a moment when you realize the people closest to you might not be who you thought they were? It's a stomach-dropping feeling that I wouldn't wish on anyone. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Enough. Dad's voice cut through the noise. Everyone needs to calm down and let Jessica think. But when I looked at his face, I could see he was just as affected as everyone else. There was something calculating in his expression, like he was already spending money that wasn't his. "This is incredible news for our family," he continued. "We need to be smart about this. Make plans. Jessica's never handled this kind of money before." "What do you mean, our family?" I asked. The question seemed to surprise him. "Well, you're living here. We're all going to need to work together to manage this responsibly." "Manage this?" "Honey," Mom joined in, her voice syrupy sweet, "you can't possibly handle $29 million on your own. You've never even had a credit card." I looked around the room at these people I'd known my entire life, and for the first time, I felt like a stranger among them. The way they were talking, it was like the money belonged to all of us, like my inheritance was somehow a family windfall. "I think everyone should go home," I said quietly. "I need some time to process this." "Process what?" Uncle Jerry laughed. "You just won the lottery, kid. Time to celebrate." "I didn't win anything," I corrected. "This was left to me by someone who thought I deserved it." "And now you can take care of your family," Grandpa Miller said firmly. "It's what she would have wanted." "How would you know what she wanted?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "None of you even talked to her." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I'd just broken an unspoken rule about family loyalty and gratitude. "Jessica," Mom's voice carried a warning, "we're just trying to help you make good decisions. By deciding how I should spend my money, it's not just your money anymore," Tommy said quietly. "It's family money. That's how these things work." That's when I knew Margaret had been right to warn me. The money hadn't changed me at all, but it had revealed who my family really was. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear their voices discussing my inheritance like it was already communal property. By 3 a.m., I'd made a decision that would have been unthinkable 24 hours earlier. I was moving out. Friday morning, I called Robert Henley's office. "I need to access some of the funds immediately," I told his assistant, "and I need recommendations for financial advisors who specialize in protecting assets." "Miss Miller," Robert said when he came on the line, "is everything all right? You sound distressed." I gave him a condensed version of the previous night's events. He listened without interrupting, then sighed deeply. "Margaret predicted this might happen," he said. "She left additional instructions in case your family became problematic." "Additional instructions?" "She established a trust structure that protects the bulk of your inheritance from external claims. She was very concerned about family members who might feel entitled to your money." Smart woman. Paranoid, but smart. "Can you recommend somewhere I can stay while I figure this out?" I asked. "I don't think I can handle another family meeting about my finances. I know a discreet hotel downtown. Let me make some calls." An hour later, I was packing a bag while my parents were at work, and Tommy was at summer classes. I took only essential items, leaving everything else behind. On my desk, I left a note. "I need some time to think. Don't worry about me." I thought it would buy me a few days of peace. I was wrong. My phone started ringing before I'd even reached the hotel. First Mom, then Dad, then Tommy. When I didn't answer, the calls became more frequent and increasingly frantic. Finally, I turned off my phone and checked into the Riverside Hotel under a fake name. Robert had arranged for a suite with complete privacy, and for the first time in 48 hours, I could breathe. The peace lasted exactly 6 hours. Room service was delivering my dinner when I heard familiar voices in the hallway. Through the peephole, I saw my entire family marching toward my door with the kind of determination usually reserved for military operations. The knock, when it came, rattled the doorframe. "Jessica!" Dad's voice boomed through the wood. "Open this door right now!" I sat on the bed, paralyzed. How had they found me? "We know you're in there," Mom called. "The hotel manager confirmed you're registered." Apparently, small-town connections worked both ways. Someone at the front desk had recognized the Miller name and made a phone call. "Jessica, this is ridiculous." Tommy joined in. "You're acting like a child." I wasn't acting like anything. I was a 28-year-old woman who wanted to make her own decisions about her own money. But apparently, that was too much to ask. When I didn't respond, the knocking became pounding. Other hotel guests started opening their doors to see what the commotion was about. The manager appeared, looking mortified at the scene my family was creating in his elegant establishment. "Folks," I heard him say, "you need to keep it down or I'll have to ask you to leave." "That's our daughter in there," Dad shouted. "She's not thinking clearly." "Sir, your daughter is an adult guest who has requested privacy. If you don't lower your voices, I'm calling security." The pounding stopped, but I could hear heated whispers in the hallway. Finally, their voices faded as they moved away from my door. My phone, which I'd turned back on to order room service, immediately lit up with notifications. Dozens of missed calls, text messages, and voicemails. I scrolled through them, watching the tone evolve from worried to angry to manipulative. "Mom, honey, we're just concerned about you. Please call." "Dad, this behavior is unacceptable. Come home immediately." "Tommy, you're being selfish. Think about what this money could do for all of us." "Uncle Jerry, don't let this money go to your head, kid. Remember where you came from." But it was the last message that made my blood run cold. A voicemail from Dad, left just 10 minutes earlier. "Jessica, I don't know what that lawyer told you, but you need to understand something. That money belongs to our family. Margaret was a Miller, and Millers take care of each other. If you don't start acting responsibly, we're going to have to take steps to protect you from yourself. Protect me from myself." The threat was barely veiled, but it was definitely a threat. I called Robert Henley's emergency line. "They're threatening to take legal action," I told him. "Something about protecting me from myself." "Can they do that?" I asked, panic creeping into my voice. "Not successfully," he assured me. "But they can try, and legal challenges can be expensive and time-consuming. We should move quickly to ensure your assets are completely protected. What do you recommend?" "Transfer everything to the trust structure Margaret established. Once that's done, they'll have no legal standing to make any claims." "Do it," I said without hesitation. As Robert explained the process, I realized Margaret had anticipated this exact scenario. She'd known my family would react this way, had known they'd try to claim what was mine. She'd protected me from them before I even knew I needed protection. But why hadn't she warned me directly? Why let me walk into this blindly? That's when I found the second letter. Robert had included a sealed envelope with the trust documents, marked "Open if family becomes hostile." Inside was another letter from Margaret, this one much longer and more detailed. "Jessica," it began, "if you're reading this, then they've shown their true colors. I'm sorry you had to learn this way, but some lessons can only be taught by experience." She went on to describe years of watching my family from a distance, how Uncle Jerry had called her repeatedly asking for loans that were never repaid, how my grandparents had suggested she should invest in Tommy's education since brilliant boys like him don't come along often, how my own parents had discussed the possibility of Margaret's inheritance for years, speculating about who might benefit when she passed. "Everyone except you," the letter continued. "You never once asked me for anything. Never mentioned money in your birthday thank you cards. Never even asked your parents for my contact information. That told me everything I needed to know about your character. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. Your family has been planning for this inheritance for months. They knew I was sick before I died. Your father actually flew to California in December to visit me in the hospital. He spent 3 days trying to convince me to change my will, to make the inheritance a family trust that he could manage." My hands started shaking as I read the next paragraph. "When I refused, he became quite aggressive. He told me you were irresponsible with money, that you'd waste any inheritance on frivolous things. He suggested that a responsible family member should oversee any funds left to you. He even brought documentation showing your employment history and bank account balance, as if being poor was evidence of poor character. I had to put the letter down for a moment. My father had actually flown to California to try to manipulate a dying woman into changing her will. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that I couldn't process it. The letter continued. I told him that your financial struggles were exactly why you deserved the inheritance. You'd learned the value of money through scarcity, not abundance. You'd developed empathy and humility through hardship. Those were the qualities I wanted to reward. There was more. So much more. Margaret detailed how my family had been monitoring her condition through distant relatives, how they'd discussed Jessica's windfall at Christmas dinner months before Margaret actually passed away, how they'd already made plans for what to do with the money, paying off debts, buying a bigger house, setting up college funds. They'd been counting my inheritance before Margaret was even in the ground. The final paragraphs of the letter contained instructions I never could have anticipated. Jessica, I'm giving you a choice. You can try to maintain relationships with people who see you as a bank account, or you can build a new life with people who value you for who you are. The money I'm leaving you isn't just an inheritance. It's freedom. The freedom to walk away from anyone who doesn't deserve you. She'd included contact information for lawyers, financial advisors, and even a private investigator who could help me understand the full extent of my family's planning and scheming. If you choose to cut ties completely, the letter concluded, know that you're not abandoning family. You're abandoning people who abandoned you the moment they learned you had something they wanted. I sat in that hotel room for hours, reading and rereading Margaret's words. Everything made sense now. Their strange behavior before I'd even told them about the inheritance. Their immediate assumption that the money should benefit everyone. Their threats when I tried to maintain some independence. They'd been planning this for months. My phone buzzed with another text from Tommy. Dad's meeting with a lawyer tomorrow. You need to come home and fix this before it gets ugly. Too late, I thought. It was already ugly. But if they wanted to play hardball, I had 29 million reasons to play harder. I called Robert Henley again. I need to move the trust transfer up, I said, and I need you to find me a new place to live. Somewhere my family can't find me. Miss Miller, are you sure you want to take such drastic steps? Sometimes families just need time to adjust to major changes. My family has been adjusting to this change for months, I said. They just didn't bother to include me in their plans. There was a long pause. I understand. We'll have everything arranged by tomorrow morning. And Robert, I want to make sure they understand that their behavior has consequences. Is there a way to legally document what they've done? What do you have in mind? I thought about Margaret's letter, about my father's trip to California, about their months of planning to spend my money. I want them to know that I know. Everything. That can be arranged, he said quietly. For the first time since this all began, I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile, but it felt good nonetheless. If my family wanted to treat me like an adversary, then I'd show them what a real adversary looked like. Saturday morning arrived with what I can only describe as the most satisfying phone call of my life. Miss Miller, Robert Henley's voice was crisp and professional. The trust transfer is complete. As of 8 a.m. this morning, your entire inheritance is legally protected in an irrevocable trust structure. No one else can make any claims against these assets. I was sitting in the penthouse suite of a downtown hotel, looking out over a city that suddenly felt full of possibilities instead of threats. And the other matter we discussed? Our private investigator has completed his report. Your family's activities over the past 6 months have been thoroughly documented. We have phone records, emails, travel receipts, and even recordings of conversations they had with distant relatives about managing your expected inheritance. The evidence was even more damning than Margaret's letter had suggested. Dad hadn't just visited Margaret once. He'd made 3 separate trips to California, each time pressuring her to change the will. He'd even consulted with his own lawyer about the possibility of contesting whatever inheritance I might receive. They were planning an intervention, Robert continued. If you hadn't moved out yesterday, they intended to have you declared financially incompetent and petition for guardianship over your assets. The words hit me like ice water. Guardianship. They were going to try to have me declared legally unable to manage my own affairs, all so they could control my money. How far did they get with that plan? Quite far, actually. They had appointments scheduled with 3 different psychiatrists for next week, hoping to get medical opinions supporting their case. They also consulted with a judge about emergency conservatorship proceedings. I closed my eyes, imagining how that would have played out. A series of family interventions designed to make me seem unstable and irresponsible. Medical professionals who only heard their version of events. Legal proceedings where I would have been portrayed as a naive young woman overwhelmed by sudden wealth. The good news, Robert continued, is that none of their plans matter now. The trust structure makes their legal strategy impossible to execute, but I think it's important you understand how far they were willing to go. There was a knock at my hotel door. I looked through the peephole to see a professionally dressed woman with a briefcase. "That's Sarah Chen," Robert said, apparently reading my mind. "She's the financial advisor I mentioned. She'll help you understand your options going forward." Sarah Chen turned out to be exactly what I needed. Intelligent, direct, and completely uninterested in my family drama. She laid out a comprehensive plan for managing my inheritance, including investments, philanthropy options, and strategies for building long-term wealth. "The most important thing," she explained, "is that you take time to adjust before making any major decisions. Sudden wealth can be overwhelming, and there are many people who will try to take advantage of your situation." "Like my family?" She nodded grimly. Family members are actually the most common source of financial exploitation for inheritance recipients. They often feel entitled to funds that don't belong to them. We spent 3 hours going over investment strategies, tax implications, and security measures. By the end of our meeting, I had a clear understanding of my financial position and a concrete plan for protecting my assets. "One more thing," Sarah said as she prepared to leave. "You mentioned wanting to send a message to your family about consequences. I'd recommend having your lawyer deliver documentation of their activities. Sometimes the threat of exposure is more effective than actual legal action." That afternoon, I authorized Robert to send a comprehensive package to my parents' house. It included copies of all the evidence about their planning, legal documentation of the trust transfer, and a formal cease and desist letter demanding they stop all contact with me. The package was delivered at 4 p.m. on Saturday. My phone started ringing at 4:15. I let every call go to voicemail, listening to the messages as they came in. The progression was fascinating. Shock, denial, anger, and finally, desperate bargaining. "Dad, Jessica, I don't know what lies that lawyer has been filling your head with, but we need to talk immediately." "Mom, honey, you don't understand. Everything we did was to protect you. Please don't let strangers turn you against your family." "Tommy, this is insane, Jess. You're destroying our family over money." "Uncle Jerry, you ungrateful little brat. After everything this family has done for you." And finally, a message that made me realize I'd made the right choice. "Grandpa Miller, if you think you're too good for your family now, then you were never really one of us anyway. Don't come crying to us when you realize money can't buy you love." I saved every voicemail, every text message, every piece of evidence of their true feelings. Not because I planned to use them, but because I wanted to remember this moment, the moment I learned who my family really was. That evening, I ordered room service and opened a bottle of very expensive champagne, not to celebrate my wealth, but to celebrate my freedom. For 28 years, I'd felt like I didn't quite fit with my family. I'd always assumed the problem was with me, that I wasn't ambitious enough, successful enough, or valuable enough to earn their respect. Now I understood the truth. The problem wasn't that I didn't fit with them. The problem was that I was better than them. And tomorrow I was going to start building a life that reflected that reality. The thought of what came next should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like the first day of my real life. But I had no idea what my family was planning for tomorrow, or how far they'd be willing to go to get what they thought they deserved. I was about to find out that $29 million was enough to turn my own blood relatives into complete strangers. And some of those strangers were about to become very dangerous people. 3 weeks later, I was living in a furnished apartment in the city's arts district, finally understanding what peace felt like. No more family dinners where I was the target of passive-aggressive comments. No more listening to lectures about responsibility while being treated like a child. Just quiet mornings with good coffee and the freedom to make my own decisions. What do you think will happen next? Will Jessica's family give up? Or are they planning something even more desperate? Let me know your predictions in the comments. I'd started volunteering at a literacy center, something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for when I was working constantly just to survive. Turns out having financial security gives you the luxury of choosing meaningful work over necessary work. The director, Maria Santos, knew nothing about my inheritance. To her, I was just Jessica, a book lover who wanted to help adults learn to read. It felt incredible to be valued for my time and effort rather than my bank account. My family, however, wasn't giving up so easily. The first sign of escalation came when I found my Uncle Jerry waiting outside my apartment building on a Tuesday morning. He was leaning against his truck, cigarette dangling from his lips, with the kind of casual menace that suggested he'd been there for a while. "Morning, millionaire," he called out as I approached the entrance. "Nice neighborhood. Must cost a fortune. What do you want, Jerry?" I kept my voice level, though my heart was racing. Just thought we'd have a little chat. Family to family. He flicked his cigarette into the street. See, the thing is, your parents are real torn up about this whole situation. Your mom's barely eating, your dad's not sleeping. Tommy had to drop out of his summer program because they can't afford it anymore. That's not my problem. His expression hardened. Everything's your problem now, sweetheart. You're the one with all the money. Money that was left to me. Not to you, not to them. To me. Jerry stepped closer, and I caught the smell of alcohol on his breath, despite it being 8 in the morning. You know what I think? I think that old bat filled your head with poison about your family. Made you think you're better than us. She didn't have to fill my head with anything. You all did that yourselves. Careful, Jessica. His voice dropped to a whisper. Accidents happen to people who forget where they come from, especially people living alone in the big city. The threat was unmistakable. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Are you threatening me, Uncle Jerry? His face went red when he realized what I was doing. I'm not threatening nobody. Just having a conversation with my ungrateful niece. This conversation is over. I walked past him toward the building entrance. This isn't over, he shouted after me. Family takes care of family, Jessica. One way or another, I called Robert Henley before I'd even reached my apartment door. We need to file a restraining order, I told him after playing the recording. And I think I need security. I was afraid this might happen, Robert said grimly. Desperate people do desperate things. I'll have someone at your building within the hour. The security consultant, David Morrison, was a former police detective who specialized in protecting high-net-worth individuals from family threats. He was professional, discreet, and completely unsurprised by my situation. Family money disputes are some of the nastiest cases I handle, he explained as he installed additional locks on my apartment door. Blood doesn't make people trustworthy. Sometimes it makes them more dangerous because they feel entitled. That afternoon, I received a formal letter from a lawyer I'd never heard of. My family was contesting Margaret's will, claiming undue influence and mental incompetence. They were also demanding a family meeting to resolve the situation amicably before it reaches the courts. I laughed when I read it. Apparently, they still thought they could intimidate me into compliance. My response was swift and decisive. Robert filed countersuits for harassment, attempted fraud, and conspiracy to commit financial exploitation. We also released some of the evidence about their pre-inheritance planning to demonstrate their bad faith. The local newspaper picked up the story. Local family fights over inheritance made the front page of Wednesday's edition, complete with quotes from anonymous sources describing the family's behavior. My phone exploded with calls from reporters, distant relatives, and random strangers wanting to share their opinions about family loyalty and money. I ignored them all, but I did read some of the letters to the editor that were published over the following days. About half supported my family's position. Money should be shared with relatives. Blood is thicker than water. Inheritance should benefit everyone. But the other half saw through their manipulation, especially after more details about their planning emerged. One letter particularly stood out. If this family cared so much about Jessica before she had money, where were they when she was struggling? True family supports you when you have nothing, not just when you have everything. Friday evening, I was having dinner with Emma, my best friend who'd been my rock through all of this, when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We know where you live. We know where you work. We know your routine. Stop hiding behind lawyers and face your family like an adult. I showed the message to Emma, whose face went pale. Jess, this is scary. They're stalking you. I know. I forwarded the text to David Morrison, but I'm not backing down. Maybe you should consider moving somewhere else, like far away. I'd thought about it. Sarah Chen had suggested I could relocate anywhere in the world. Start fresh somewhere my family couldn't find me. But running felt like letting them win. This is my life, I told Emma. I'm not going to let them scare me away from it. But even as I said the words, I wondered if I was being brave or just stubborn. The threats were escalating, and I had no idea how far they were willing to go. That question would be answered sooner than I expected. The answer came at 3 a.m. Saturday morning when my building's fire alarm started shrieking. I stumbled out of bed, grabbed my emergency bag, and joined the stream of residents evacuating into the street. The fire department arrived within minutes. But there was no fire. Someone had deliberately triggered the alarm system and disabled the security cameras before doing it. While residents milled around outside in their pajamas, whoever set off the alarm had plenty of time to search the building undetected. Miss Miller? A firefighter approached me with a serious expression. Your apartment door was forced open. Nothing appears to be missing, but someone definitely went through your belongings. David Morrison arrived before the police finished taking statements. His face was grim as he surveyed my ransacked apartment. Drawers had been emptied, closets searched, furniture moved. They were looking for something specific. Financial documents, David concluded after examining the search pattern. Bank statements, investment records, anything that might give them insight into your accounts or legal vulnerabilities. Fortunately, I kept all important documents in a safety deposit box. And my financial information was handled entirely through Robert's office. Whoever had broken in found nothing useful. But the message was clear. They could reach me anywhere. "That's it," David said firmly. "You're moving to a secure location immediately." By Sunday afternoon, I was settled into a corporate apartment in a building with hour security and controlled access. The space was sterile and impersonal, but it was safe. David assured me that my family would have no way to track me there. Monday brought a new escalation. Tommy appeared on a local morning talk show, playing the role of concerned brother to perfection. "Jessica has always been fragile," he told the sympathetic host. "We're worried that sudden wealth has triggered some kind of psychological break. She's cut off all contact with people who love her and surrounded herself with strangers who only care about her money." The performance was flawless. He painted me as an unstable victim being manipulated by greedy lawyers and financial advisors. He talked about our close family bond, how devastated my parents were, how they just wanted to help me make responsible decisions. "We're not trying to take anything from her," he said with tears in his eyes. "We just want our sister back." It was masterful manipulation, and it worked. Public opinion, which had been split, shifted towards sympathy for my family. Social media exploded with criticism of my behavior and demands that I do the right thing. I watched the interview from my secure apartment, marveling at Tommy's acting ability. He'd always been the golden child, but I'd never realized he was also a sociopath. My phone rang immediately after the show ended. Robert Henley's voice was tight with anger. "We need to respond to this immediately," he said. "He's building a public case for declaring you mentally incompetent. Can he do that?" "Not successfully, but he can try. And public opinion matters in legal proceedings. Judges are human beings who watch the news like everyone else." We scheduled a press conference for Tuesday afternoon. I spent hours preparing with a media consultant, learning how to stay calm under pressure and deliver clear, factual responses to hostile questions. The press conference was held in Robert's office, with carefully selected evidence displayed on boards behind me. Photos of my family's planning documents, copies of their legal consultations, transcripts of their conversations about managing my expected inheritance. "My family has spent 6 months planning how to spend money I hadn't inherited yet," I said, looking directly into the cameras. "They consulted lawyers about contesting any will before my great-aunt even died. They planned intervention strategies to have me declared incompetent if I didn't cooperate with their financial plans." I held up printed copies of their emails and phone records. "This isn't about family loyalty or concern for my well-being. This is about greed. Pure and simple. They want money that isn't theirs, and they're willing to destroy me to get it." The questions came fast and aggressive, but I was prepared. When a reporter asked about family loyalty, I responded with specific examples of their betrayals. When someone suggested I should share the inheritance, I explained Margaret's reasons for leaving it to me alone. "My great-aunt watched my family for years," I said. "She saw how they treated money, how they treated each other, and how they treated me. She made her decision based on character, not blood relations." The press conference shifted public opinion back in my favor, but it also raised the stakes. My family now knew I had documented evidence of their planning and was willing to use it publicly. Wednesday morning, I received a call that changed everything. "Miss Miller?" The voice was unfamiliar and nervous. "This is Detective Sarah Walsh with the Metropolitan Police. We need to speak with you immediately about threats made against your life." My blood went cold. "What kind of threats?" "The kind that suggest your family dispute has moved beyond civil court," she said. "We have credible information that someone is planning to harm you. Can you come to the station right away?" As David Morrison drove me to the police station, I realized that $29 million had turned my own relatives into something I never could have imagined. They weren't just willing to lie, cheat, and steal to get my money. They were apparently willing to kill for it. Detective Walsh was younger than I'd expected, with sharp eyes and the kind of direct manner that suggested she'd seen everything before. She led me into a small interview room where another detective was waiting. "Miss Miller, I'm Detective Rodriguez," the older man said. "We received a tip this morning about a conversation overheard at Murphy's bar last night. 3 men discussing ways to solve the Jessica problem permanently." My mouth went dry. "What did they say, exactly?" Detective Walsh consulted her notes. The exact quote was, If she won't listen to reason, maybe she'll listen to fear. And if she won't listen to fear, maybe she won't need to listen to anything anymore. Do you know who the men were? We have descriptions. One matches your Uncle Jerry Miller. Another sounds like your cousin Ryan. The third was someone they called Tony, possibly a friend or associate. Detective Rodriguez leaned forward. Miss Miller, we take threats against life very seriously, especially when money is involved. We'd like to offer you police protection while we investigate. I thought about the break-in, the stalking, the escalating aggression. What kind of investigation? We're going to place the bar under surveillance and monitor the individuals we identified. We're also going to coordinate with your security team to ensure your safety. Detective Walsh added, we'd also like to wire you for any future contact with family members. If they make direct threats, we need evidence for prosecution. The idea of wearing a recording device to catch my own family making death threats was surreal, but I agreed. This had gone far beyond a civil dispute about money. That afternoon, I met with Robert and Sarah Chen to discuss contingency plans. The conversation was sobering. If something happens to you, Sarah explained, your trust structure protects the inheritance from any family claims. They can't benefit from your death. That's reassuring, I said dryly. But, Robert continued, we need to consider that they may not understand the legal protections in place. Desperate people don't always think clearly about consequences. We updated my will to ensure my family received absolutely nothing if I died under suspicious circumstances. The inheritance would go entirely to literacy charities, with a special provision that funded investigations into my death if it wasn't clearly accidental. Morbid but effective, Robert noted. If they research your new will, it should deter any extreme actions. Thursday passed quietly, but Friday brought a development I hadn't expected. My mother showed up at the literacy center where I volunteered. I was helping a woman named Patricia with her reading exercises when Maria Santos approached with a worried expression. Jessica, there's someone here to see you. She says she's your mother. Through the window, I could see Mom sitting in her car in the parking lot, hands gripping the steering wheel. She looked smaller than I remembered, older and more fragile. I'll handle this, I told Maria, then texted David Morrison about the situation. I approached the car cautiously, my phone ready to record. Mom rolled down the window when she saw me coming. Jessica, she said, and her voice was barely a whisper. We need to talk. About what? About this madness. About what's happening to our family. I looked at her closely. She looked genuinely distressed. Not angry or manipulative like the others. Are you wearing a wire, Mom? The question seemed to surprise her. What? No, of course not. Because if this is some kind of setup, Jessica, please. Tears started rolling down her cheeks. I just want my daughter back. Against my better judgment, I got into the passenger seat. She immediately locked the doors. Mom, unlock the doors. Just listen to me for 5 minutes. Please. She reached into her purse, and for a terrifying moment, I thought she was pulling out a weapon. Instead, she withdrew a stack of photographs. Look at these, she said, spreading them across the dashboard. Look at us. The photos were from my childhood. Birthday parties, family vacations, Christmas mornings, all showing what appeared to be a loving, normal family. We weren't perfect, she continued, but we loved you. We still love you. Love doesn't involve planning to have someone declared mentally incompetent to steal their money. Her face crumpled. That wasn't love. That was fear. Fear of what? Fear of losing you forever. Fear that you'd become like her. Like who? Like Margaret. The name came out like a curse. Cold, bitter, isolated. She never trusted anyone, never let anyone close. She died alone, Jessica. Completely alone. She died alone because her family only cared about her money. And now you're doing the same thing. Mom's voice rose to a near shout. You're cutting us off, surrounding yourself with strangers, becoming exactly what she was. I stared at her, seeing something I'd never recognized before. You're not sorry about trying to steal my inheritance. You're sorry you got caught. I'm sorry we handled it wrong, she said quickly. But Jessica, you have to understand. $29 million changes everything. It changes how people see you, how they treat you, how they think about you. We were trying to protect you from that. By taking my money and controlling my life? By making sure you didn't have to face it alone. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Mom alternating between guilt-tripping, emotional manipulation, and what seemed like genuine concern. But underneath it all, I could hear the same entitlement that had driven everything else. She wanted me to forgive them, give them access to my money, and pretend their betrayal had never happened. She wanted me to be grateful for their protection and accept their control over my financial decisions. When I finally got out of the car, she made one last desperate attempt. Jessica, if you don't come home, something terrible is going to happen. Your father and Jerry are planning something. I don't know what, but they're talking about teaching you a lesson and bringing you back to reality. What kind of lesson? I don't know, she sobbed. But please, just come home. We can work this out as a family. I looked at this woman who had raised me, fed me, supposedly loved me, and realized that she was willing to use death threats against me as leverage for family reconciliation. Tell Dad and Jerry that if they try anything, they'll go to prison, I said. The police are already watching them. Her face went white. Police? You didn't think threatening to kill someone would go unnoticed, did you? I walked back into the literacy center, leaving her sitting in the parking lot. Through the window, I watched her make several phone calls before finally driving away. That evening, Detective Walsh called with an update that confirmed my worst fears. We recorded a conversation between your uncle and 2 associates, she said. They're planning to grab you tomorrow night when you leave your building. The plan is to take you somewhere isolated and convince you to sign over power of attorney to your father. And if I don't agree, based on what we heard, they have backup plans. None of them good. The recording she played for me was chilling. Jerry's voice, slurred with alcohol but clear in its intent. She'll sign whatever we want her to sign once she understands we're serious. And if she doesn't, well, accidents happen. My own uncle was planning to kidnap and possibly murder me for money. As I hung up the phone, I realized something that should have been obvious from the beginning. This was never going to end until someone ended it. And that someone was going to be me. Saturday morning, I made a decision that would have terrified the Jessica from a month ago. Instead of hiding behind security and lawyers, I was going to set a trap. Absolutely not, David Morrison said when I explained my plan. You're not using yourself as bait. They're never going to stop, I argued. And eventually, they'll find a way to get to me. Better to control the situation than wait for them to control it. Detective Walsh was equally opposed. Miss Miller, we can arrest them based on the recorded conversations. You don't need to put yourself at risk. Recorded conversations about hypothetical plans, I pointed out. Good lawyers can argue that was just drunk talk. I need them to actually attempt something. Robert Henley looked like he wanted to physically restrain me. Jessica, if something goes wrong, I'll have police backup and professional security. If I don't do this, I'll spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. It took hours of argument. But finally, they agreed to a modified version of my plan. I would appear to follow my normal routine, leaving the secure building at my usual time. But instead of being alone, I'd be surrounded by undercover officers and David's security team. The trap was set for Saturday evening. I spent the day reviewing the plan with everyone involved. I'd leave my building at 7 p.m., walk to the coffee shop where I usually spent Saturday evenings, and wait for my family to make their move. Police would be stationed throughout the area, and David would be monitoring from a van across the street. Remember, Detective Walsh said during our final briefing, we need them to make an overt act. Let them approach you, but don't go anywhere with them willingly. Once they try to force you into a vehicle or threaten you with a weapon, we'll move in. At 6:30, I stood in my apartment looking at myself in the mirror. The scared young woman who'd been kicked out of her parents' house was gone. In her place was someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous to people who underestimated her. Margaret had been right about money revealing character. My family's character had been revealed as greed, manipulation, and violence. But my character had been revealed too, and I was surprised by what I'd found. I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. At exactly 7 p.m., I walked out of my building and headed toward the coffee shop. The street seemed normal. Saturday evening foot traffic, people heading out for dinner, nothing obviously suspicious. But I could feel eyes watching me. Halfway to the coffee shop, Jerry's pickup truck pulled up beside me. The passenger window rolled down, revealing my cousin Ryan. Hey, Jessica, he called out with fake friendliness. Want a ride? No thanks, I replied, continuing to walk. The truck kept pace with me. Come on, cuz, let's talk. We have nothing to talk about. I think we do. The truck stopped, and Ryan got out. He was bigger than I remembered, and there was something cold in his eyes that made my skin crawl. I kept walking, but Jerry had driven ahead and parked, blocking my path to the coffee shop. He emerged from the driver's side with a third man I didn't recognize, presumably the Tony from the bar conversation. Jessica, Jerry said, spreading his arms wide in a mockery of welcome. Time for a family reunion. I stopped walking and pulled out my phone. I'm calling the police. Tony moved faster than I expected, grabbing my wrist and twisting until I dropped the phone. I don't think so, sweetheart. Let go of me. Not until you listen to reason, Jerry said, moving closer. See, we've been patient with you, but patience has limits. What do you want? Simple. Ryan produced a folded document from his jacket. Sign this power of attorney, and we can all go back to being family. I looked at the document without touching it. Power of attorney for what? For your financial affairs, Jerry explained, since you're obviously not competent to manage this kind of money yourself. And if I refuse? Tony's grip on my wrist tightened painfully. I don't think you want to find out. This was it, the moment they crossed from threats to action. I looked around as if searching for help, knowing that police officers were positioned throughout the area. You're really going to kidnap me for money? We're not kidnapping anyone, Jerry said smoothly. We're having a family intervention. Sometimes people need help making good decisions. By threatening them? By protecting them from their own stupidity. His voice hardened. Sign the paper. Jessica, last chance. I met his eyes directly. Go to hell. Tony twisted my arm harder, making me gasp with pain. Wrong answer. Get her in the truck, Ryan ordered, moving toward me. That's when Detective Walsh's voice cut through the evening air. Police, nobody move! The street exploded with activity. Officers emerged from doorways, parked cars, and side streets. Tony released my wrist and tried to run, but was tackled within 10 feet. Ryan froze like a deer in headlights, hands raised in automatic surrender. Jerry was the only one who fought. He actually pulled out a knife, screaming about family loyalty and greedy bitches who forgot where they came from. It took 3 officers to subdue him. As they loaded my relatives into police cars, Detective Rodriguez approached me with something that might have been admiration. That was either very brave or very stupid, he said. Probably both, I admitted, rubbing my wrist where Tony had grabbed me. Are you okay? I looked at the police cars, at my Uncle Jerry screaming curses at me through the window, at the cousins and stranger who'd been willing to kidnap me for money. Yeah, I said, and realized I meant it. I'm okay. For the first time in weeks, I actually was. The arrest made national news. Millionaire heiress helps police catch family kidnappers was the headline that appeared in newspapers across the country. Cable news picked up the story, turning my family dispute into a cautionary tale about money and greed. But the real bombshell came 3 days later, when Detective Walsh called with information that changed everything I thought I knew about my family. Miss Miller, we found something during our investigation that you need to know about. Can you come to the station? This time, the interview room contained boxes of evidence and a laptop computer. Detective Rodriguez looked grim as he gestured for me to sit down. We executed search warrants on your family members' homes and businesses, he began. What we found goes far beyond the kidnapping plot. He opened the laptop and showed me a series of emails dating back over 2 years. They were between my father and various people, discussing the Margaret situation and inheritance planning. Your family has been monitoring Margaret's health and finances for much longer than you realized, Detective Walsh explained. They hired a private investigator to track her medical condition and estimate her wealth. The emails detailed a systematic campaign to position themselves for Margaret's inheritance. They'd researched her legal team, her medical care, even her daily routines. They'd planned to contest any will that didn't benefit them, regardless of Margaret's actual wishes. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. Your father made more than 3 visits to California, Detective Rodriguez said quietly. He made 7 visits over 18 months, and not all of them were to see Margaret. He showed me airline records, hotel receipts, and rental car agreements. Dad had been making regular trips to California, but many of them were to Los Angeles, not to Margaret's location in San Francisco. We believe he was meeting with individuals who specialize in elder abuse and inheritance fraud, Detective Walsh explained. People who help families influence elderly relatives to change their wills. The evidence was overwhelming. My father had been working with professional con artists to manipulate a dying woman into changing her will. When those efforts failed, the family had moved to Plan B, having me declared incompetent after I inherited. When that failed, they'd moved to Plan C, kidnapping and extortion. But there's more, Detective Rodriguez said, opening another file. We found evidence that your family was planning to contest the will from the beginning, regardless of what it said. They'd already hired lawyers and prepared documentation to claim Margaret was mentally incompetent when she wrote it. I stared at the evidence spread across the table. They never had any intention of accepting her decision. None whatsoever. They viewed the inheritance as rightfully theirs from the moment they learned about her wealth. Detective Walsh leaned forward. Miss Miller, based on this evidence, we're preparing additional charges against your family members. Conspiracy to commit elder abuse, attempted inheritance fraud, and conspiracy to commit kidnapping. Your father and mother could face significant prison time. My mother? She was part of the planning from the beginning. These emails show her coordination with your father's California trips and her research into Margaret's medical team. I thought about my mother's tearful performance in the parking lot, her claims of wanting to protect me, her warnings about my father's plans. All of it had been manipulation. There's one more thing, Detective Rodriguez said. We found evidence that your family borrowed money against the expected inheritance. Significant amounts of money. He showed me loan documents, credit applications, and bank records. My family had taken out over $300,000 in loans, using Margaret's estate as collateral. They'd bought a new house, financed Tommy's medical school, and invested in Dad's construction business expansion. They spent money they didn't have, counting on an inheritance they weren't entitled to, Detective Walsh explained. When you inherited instead of them, they became financially desperate. The full scope of their betrayal was staggering. This wasn't just about greed or entitlement. They'd built their entire financial future around stealing from a dying woman. And when that failed, they'd turned their criminal energy toward me. What happens now? I asked. Now we prosecute, Detective Rodriguez said firmly. This kind of systematic elder abuse and inheritance fraud needs to be stopped. I thought about Margaret's letter, her warnings about my family's true character, her decision to protect me through the trust structure. She'd known this would happen. She'd seen their capacity for evil more clearly than I ever had. Do it, I said. Prosecute them for everything. That evening, I sat in my secure apartment and called Emma. I saw the news, she said immediately. Are you okay? I'm better than okay, I realized as I said it. I'm free. Free from what? From believing I owed them anything. From thinking blood relations meant automatic loyalty. From carrying guilt about having something they wanted. Emma was quiet for a moment. What are you going to do now? I looked around the sterile apartment, thinking about the life I'd been building before my family's criminal behavior had consumed everything. I'm going to live, I said. Really live. For the first time in my life. But first, I had one more confrontation to face. My parents had been arrested that morning, and they were being held pending bail hearings. I had the right to give a victim impact statement before their release was considered. It was time for the final conversation with the people who'd raised me. And this time, I was going to have the last word. The courthouse was buzzing with reporters when I arrived for the bail hearing. My family's story had captured national attention as an extreme example of inheritance disputes gone wrong. Camera crews followed me from the parking lot to the building entrance, shouting questions I ignored. Inside, I sat in the gallery behind the prosecution table, watching as my parents were led into the courtroom in orange jumpsuits and handcuffs. They looked smaller somehow, diminished by the reality of their situation. Mom saw me first. Her face crumpled when our eyes met, and she mouthed, "I'm sorry," across the courtroom. Dad stared straight ahead, his jaw set in familiar stubborn lines. The bail hearing was straightforward. The prosecutor outlined the charges: conspiracy to commit elder abuse, attempted inheritance fraud, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, and attempted extortion. The evidence was overwhelming, and the amounts involved made this a serious felony case. Your Honor, the defense attorney argued, these are hardworking people with strong community ties who made some poor decisions under financial stress. They pose no flight risk. The prosecutor disagreed. These defendants spent 18 months planning systematic criminal activity targeting vulnerable elderly individuals. When those crimes failed, they escalated to plotting kidnapping and extortion against their own daughter. This demonstrates a clear pattern of escalating criminal behavior. Judge Martinez reviewed the files carefully before speaking. Given the serious nature of these charges and the evidence of planning and premeditation, I'm setting bail at $50,000 each for Mr. and Mrs. Miller. My parents' faces went white. They didn't have $50,000. They'd spent everything on loans secured against my inheritance. Your Honor, the defense attorney said quickly, my client's daughter has substantial financial resources. Perhaps she would be willing to post bail for her parents. Every eye in the courtroom turned to me. The judge looked over his glasses in my direction. Miss Miller, you're not required to respond. But would you be willing to post bail for the defendants? I stood slowly, feeling the weight of every gaze in the room. This was the moment my parents had been counting on. That blood would prove thicker than water. That family loyalty would override their betrayals. Your Honor, I said clearly, these people spent 18 months planning to defraud my elderly great-aunt. When that failed, they plotted to have me declared mentally incompetent so they could steal my inheritance. When that failed, they conspired to kidnap me. They are not my family. They are criminals who happen to share my DNA. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. I will not be posting bail for the defendants. Mom's sob echoed through the courtroom. Dad's face turned red with rage, and he started to rise from his chair before his attorney pushed him back down. As they were led back to holding cells, Dad finally spoke directly to me for the first time since this all began. "You'll regret this," he shouted over his shoulder. "Money can't buy you a family, Jessica. When you're old and alone like Margaret, you'll understand what you threw away." I watched him disappear through the security door, feeling nothing but relief. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded me immediately. I'd prepared a brief statement with Robert's help. My great-aunt Margaret left me her inheritance because she believed I would use it responsibly and honorably. Today's proceedings prove she made the right choice. My biological relatives have shown their true character through their actions. I hope their prosecution serves as a warning to others who might consider elder abuse or inheritance fraud. "What message do you have for families facing similar disputes?" a reporter called out. "Protect yourselves," I said firmly. Love doesn't excuse criminal behavior. Blood relation doesn't justify theft or fraud. If your family only values you for what you can give them, they're not really family at all. 6 months later, my parents pleaded guilty to reduced charges and received sentences of 2 years in prison each. Jerry got 3 years for the kidnapping attempt. Tommy, who had been peripheral to the main criminal conspiracy, received probation and community service. I never spoke to any of them again. Instead, I built a new life surrounded by people who valued me for who I was, not what I had. I moved to a beautiful house in the mountains, started a foundation supporting literacy programs, and discovered what it felt like to wake up each morning without fear or guilt. Emma moved to Colorado to be my foundation's first employee. Maria Santos from the Literacy Center became a close friend and advisor. I met other inheritance recipients who'd faced similar family betrayals, and together we formed a support network for people dealing with the dark side of sudden wealth. Robert Henley became more than my lawyer. He became a trusted friend who helped me navigate the complexities of philanthropy and wealth management. Sarah Chen guided my investments with skill and integrity, helping me understand that money was a tool for building the life I wanted, not a burden to feel guilty about. Most importantly, I learned that Margaret's greatest gift wasn't the $29 million. It was the freedom to discover who I really was when I wasn't trying to earn approval from people who would never give it. I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. I was smarter than my family had given me credit for. And I was capable of building meaningful relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation or need. My biological family had seen my inheritance as money they deserved. I saw it as the key to a life I'd never dared imagine possible. They were wrong about almost everything, but they were right about one thing. I did become like Margaret. I became someone who trusted carefully, loved deeply, and refused to let anyone take advantage of my generosity. The difference was, I wasn't alone. I was surrounded by people who'd earned their place in my life through loyalty, honesty, and genuine care. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more real-life stories about family, money, and the courage to choose yourself when the people who should protect you become the people you need protection from. Remember, healing is possible, freedom is achievable, and sometimes the family you create is infinitely more valuable than the family you were born into. Your true worth has nothing to do with your bank account, and your happiness doesn't depend on anyone else's approval. Thank you for listening, and remember, you deserve people in your life who love you for exactly who you are.